Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Dev Spotlight series with MailChain. We're in for a really big treat in this episode. Today, we're talking with Patrick Skinner, and wow, it's going to be an incredible journey. I really can't wait to dive into it. I'm going to hand it over to you, Patrick. Please tell us a bit about yourself. It's really good to have you here.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, my name's Patrick Skinner, and I'm the Dev Rel for Intuition, and I'm a content manager for Developer DAO. So you've probably seen me or heard me on Developer DAO spaces and stuff like that. It's probably where a lot of people already know me from. And yeah, a little bit about how I even got into this whole wild world of web3 is I definitely don't come from the traditional route of software engineering or anything. I'm a former special operations combat medic and a mass casualty coordinator. I was actually mass casualty coordinator for like some big events like the earthquake in Haiti back in 2010 and several others. Did a lot of search and rescue around the world as well. From those, I kind of got introduced to human trafficking at that time simply because that's an opportunistic moment to make people disappear during these crazy natural disasters. Started working on teams in the Middle East and Northern Africa for human trafficking interdiction. Realized we were outfunded, outgunned in every single way, and thought, if I could potentially build something to help really negate this whole human trafficking thing, or maybe like cut off some of the funding that goes into human trafficking, I would. Somebody sent me an article back in 2019 on how NFTs could potentially negate the idea of counterfeiting or the use of counterfeiting and how those channels are used. And so I just went all in at that point. I was like, okay, I want to build something. And that's really how I got into Web3.
Well, yeah, it's definitely not the traditional software engineering route that most people discover Web3 through. It's not even the crypto route that people come through sometimes. That is a truly unique journey. I mean, absolutely incredible to hear that there's someone out there who has gone from being on the boots on the ground and experiencing some of these tragedies and then come back and thought about how they can develop a solution to help prevent them or at least hinder some of the people that are trying to do these things. So, what happened next? What was your next step?
So I started building a company called Agami, which in essence, we were using like a decentralized approach to NFC and IoT and other IoT methods for authenticating physical products. This was a really interesting question because not a lot of people were really getting into it, but companies were starting to really catch on, especially when it came to like supply chain. I started seeing a lot of RFID approaches for using some sort of NFT approach to manage supply chain. And I thought that was really cool. And then a lot of other companies were starting to get into the whole NFC, NFT integration to physical product. And the one thing that I told myself that I wanted to make sure that the technology itself continues to exist beyond me and my companies, because that's a big problem too. You do a lot of the link routing and things like that, and so something gets scanned on an NFC chip and that company no longer exists, and the NFC chip is pretty much null and void. Like it just doesn't work anymore. So I wanted to take this whole decentralized approach. So I paused a little bit of like the NFC development piece because I kind of got that piece figured out as to a couple things. One, how to make sure they're not clonable. And two, how do you make sure that somebody isn't going to be able to like take the NFC chip and put it onto a fake product or whatever. So like the whole tampering thing was kind of figured out. But the idea of like making sure the link was secure and the link continues to exist beyond the company. So that's when I started getting into things like, obviously, like Lens protocol was a pretty cool approach, but it didn't necessarily fit the mold of what I was trying to build. And then I kind of discovered Arweave. And Lens is doing this approach with Arweave. I'm definitely on the right track of like this whole developmental pipeline of Arweave. And so I'm like, okay, all right, let's do this. Let's try to do some things on Arweave. And I started kind of playing around in the ecosystem, building things on perma pages and things like that. I feel like this is starting to go in the right direction. But how do I like mass produce this? And every single one of these NFTs that are going to represent a physical product, am I looking at 1155s? Am I looking at 721s? Am I looking at something else? It's just this interesting approach that I'm still kind of developing into. So I wanted to step back and figure out, okay, let's just figure out the links. That's what I want to kind of figure out at this point. How do I make sure that these links themselves continue to exist? So then I kind of created this subsect of Agami, the company that I originally created. And I started creating an idea for Lotus Links. Now, Lotus Links is basically decentralized link tree. And so at that point, I'm like, okay, I want to be able to create something that allows people to have their own link page and not have to pay $3, $5, $10 a month to manage their link page. That's the point I'm at right now. And then later on, somewhere connect the dots of the NFC chip to those links. Then at that point, now I have a decentralized profile that can continue to exist with that physical product long after myself and the company exists. And so that's kind of the step that I'm in now.
That, I know from a lens point of view, they call it a persistent social graph, but a persistent network of any entities, really, whether it's products or currency or social profiles, is one of the things that really drew me to Web3 and Web3 social as well. It doesn't take too much understanding to just be like, well, a persistent graph is going to be so much better than, go from Twitter to Instagram, MySpace, Bebo back in the day, all of that stuff. They all fell away, but the idea of the social graph was still necessary.
I think my favorite thing about social graphs, and I love that you kind of go back and look at like MySpace and stuff, because one of the things I used to love is these different forums. Just going to different forums and like getting some questions answered, or just being a subject matter expert in that specific sector of whatever that forum is covering. Back in the day, I was really hardcore in like World of Warcraft and everything. Is at some point I can see some sort of persisting profile that can say, I'm a subject matter expert in this. I don't necessarily have a ton of knowledge in this, but I am still learning. And so being able to kind of go from platform to platform with the existing, that persisting profile shows that I have some sort of value to those specific topics and everything, which is interesting because that's kind of what intuition is really kind of building to. And I really can't allude to that because we're about to release alpha and everything. So I can't talk too much on that, but that's really kind of the direction we're going with intuition as well.
We'll get into intuition in a little bit, and I'm very excited to learn a bit more. But that persistent nature, it's funny that you mentioned World of Warcraft, because my introduction and my background when I started in Web3 was very much focused around the metaverse and blockchain gaming. And one of the key things that we've always been pushing for in that industry is a persistent, you can call it an avatar, but a persistent profile where you collect items from World of Warcraft or RuneScape or Minecraft. They all have a economy, so you can sell something in World of Warcraft and buy something with that value that you can buy it in a different game. And that persistency is still very much a core interoperable component.
I feel like Blizzard, even though Blizzard became wildly successful, I feel like Blizzard missed the boat on this opportunity, especially predating World of Warcraft. Actually, I still remember all of these crazy forums and these different stores and stuff like that, like e-commerce stores for Diablo 2 items. And it was kind of wild because you would go and you'd like buy this item and then you'd have to plan to like meet this guy on this one server, and then they would drop the items you just purchased and you'd pick them up, kind of thing. I honestly think that the activity in Diablo 2 was widely successful because of the secondary markets. And I feel like where World of Warcraft, I think they started doing like cross server kind of stuff, but they really started locking down the entire idea of like buying gold or buying items and everything like that. And I understand the point where they say they don't want to really ruin the gameplay itself, especially for those that really could just afford the monthly cost or whatever they're playing. But I think to some degree, they could have really developed their ecosystem better, at least with the intent or the approach that Web3 could potentially have. And really expanded on that, because I think they would have really pioneered that and scaled significantly other games because of that.
I think and I hope that there is a Web3 game development company out there that will be the Blizzard that could have been. I don't know whatever they're called at the moment, but they're out there somewhere building exactly that ecosystem and that community. And we'll hopefully see it in a few years, and it'll be really cool. I'm really looking forward to that.
Interesting place to be in when it comes to games, because you and I, I'm sure, both agree to a sense that any type of innovation in the space will probably find its use case in games first. and
Yeah.
then get migrated into other industries and everything. As
Yeah.
long as it's proven that it works within the gaming community, then it makes that migration.
100%. There's so many reasons for that, but I think the biggest underlying reason is the generation that is going to be at peak performance, or whatever you want to call it, when that happens, is the generation that's growing up playing video games now. So they're going to feel most comfortable doing that than any other generation. Like when I grew up, I was most comfortable with, I was the cartoon generation, just hit the iPhone generation. That was me, and I'm very comfortable with those kinds of applications. But the new gaming Generation Alpha, is going to be so comfortable just navigating that metaverse sort of world.
You can gamify anything and
Yeah,
test it within a specific ecosystem. There were a few research based initiatives inside World of Warcraft servers where they were testing the virology of specific
yeah,
diseases and everything. This one they did on a specific server where it was basically if you came in proximity for X amount of time to another player that had this
yeah,
one buff, you would end up collecting this buff. And they watched how it kind of spread throughout the entire server
yeah,
as kind of a tested model. And it's just interesting how they took something that was so gamified and turned it
yeah,
into something that was true research. And so they've done a bunch of fintech research in different games like that. They've even done governmental research to see
yeah.
how like different government builds work within a specific gamified ecosystem. And then also obviously like the virology, epidemiology, things like that have been studied in a gamified sense too.
Such a,
So it just makes sense that Web3 ecosystems can be tested, modeled, and implemented within the gaming industry as well.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
So you're, as you said, content creator at Developer DAO. You are Dev Rel as well. So
Mhm.
you're really like a hybrid of a lot of functions in the Web3 space. What aspect of it do you enjoy the most? What do you find the most challenging? If you could only do one role, what would you pick?
Dev Rel, hands down. Dev Rel. It's simply because I came from a world after my military career and between these different contracts, I'd worked in the Middle East. I lived in Abu Dhabi, and in Abu Dhabi, I spent a lot of time teaching various different medical courses, whether it was remote surgical skills or combat medicine or any type of courses like that. And I loved it simply because it was something that there were time and time again, I would have students come to me saying, wow, I learned this skill and I definitely see how I can execute this in a remote situation, very, unideal situations. And so I developed a love for teaching simply because at that time, I genuinely felt like by me taking the time to really become a subject matter expert through experience and through self training and things like that as well, I was basically in the extension of my students saving lives. And so I put a lot of passion, I put a lot of love into it. And I wanted to make sure that my students really, really learn from that. And I kind of took that approach and I've kind of pulled it over into the Web3 space as well, because I wanted to make sure that when somebody learns something from me, I want to make sure that they can execute it. But it's not just, oh, copy paste,
Yeah,
it worked for him, so it'll work for me thing. It's more intuitive in understanding the why behind everything, which I'm learning a ton from now as myself, because even though I'm like a dev rel for Intuition, we haven't released a lot of our information yet. So I don't have a lot of dev things to dev rel for. So I'm working as one of the core engineers. And I swear everybody on that team are just giga brain level engineers. So I'm learning so much.
yeah.
And one of the biggest things I really enjoy learning is just some of the whys behind their approaches as well. And I cannot wait to take what I'm learning from these engineers on the Intuition team and really apply that into some of the content that I plan on producing for Intuition, because I just look forward to the opportunity of helping others level up either in their career or even just being part of the impact in Web3 and delivering that information and being able to teach people how to create excellent Web3 products that really help the ecosystem grow.
I think that's basically, if there was a one tagline for what a DevRel should do, it's support the ecosystem and help developers grow. That's what a good DevRel does.
I have to quote Natter on this and say we're bridge builders. I mean, our whole thing is to navigate, overcome some of the chasms that are in Web3, build the bridge, and then show people how to cross the bridge. And many times you not even get paid for it. Many times it's all about just having people get from point A to point B. So that way, eventually you can show them some of the stuff that you're working on. But it could be something as simple as the basic elements of Web3 technology, how to finally get that dApp working, how to get that first contract going. And spending that little bit of time really opens the eyes to so many other people and so many other opportunities. And that's really the part that I really enjoy.
I get a sense, just talking with you here, that you're a very passionate and very good teacher, and you really do take the time to get down to the grassroots and go through something, which is very commendable. It's excellent to see.
Yeah, I love it.
So you got the Intuition Alpha, as you said, coming out soon. Is there anything that people should really be looking out for over the next, week, months?
I think there are so many different opportunities that will potentially be built on Intuition's technology. Some of the things that I really like the idea of is, think of a Web3 approach for community notes on Twitter and really quantifying the subjectivity of information. That's an interesting kind of approach because you really can't quantify a whole lot unless it's very objective, it's measurable. But if you were to possibly quantify subjective information based on the value of the information itself, the value of the information of where it's coming from, and things like that, I really think you're going to start seeing some really cool opportunities and really cool things being built on top of that type of technology. Another idea that I have that I'm going to possibly build myself, I'm a longtime jiu-jitsu practitioner. And so one of the things that we deal with a lot, and actually Web3 to in a sense has probably dealt with this too, is a lot of people saying that they know a lot more than they really do. So some guy saying, hey, I'm a black belt. And you try to look them up and you're looking everywhere for a professor or something like that you could possibly call and say, hey, is this one of your students? And it takes forever to actually say this person is a black belt in jiu-jitsu. But if you go with the Web3 approach of that, based on a collaborative approach of many other practitioners, other people can validate that person's information. And then because it's been quantified, then that person themselves are kind of incentivized of collecting that quantified information themselves. In its essence, that's what's kind of being built over in Intuition. It's really amazing technology. And I really can't wait till that information starts getting released in the alpha.
Well, we can't wait to see it either. I think your angle on data-driven knowledge and data-driven insights paired with the open transparency of the blockchain is going to be a no-brainer. I think it's going to be really good for everyone. And I'm super excited to see what other people build on top of your platform and the things you release. So if there's anybody out there that's watching that's, really big into their data and analytics, make sure to stay tuned on Intuition. We'll see what drops soon.
Awesome. Yeah.
I'm going to move on to our last question. And this is a question that I ask everybody on these series, which is, what one piece of advice, or what's the biggest piece of advice you could give to someone starting out in Web3 as a developer?
I think the thing that I have personally done is don't overcomplicate the things that you want to build in the beginning. I made this approach for Agami, this company that uses NFC chips to authenticate physical products. And now I've got to think about like manufacturing NFC chips. I got to think about the security and everything. And one of the things that you really need to make sure that you do is start very simple. And not everything needs to be your exit plan. You really take the time to build smaller things, learn from the experience, and then share that experience. And you can really take the time to build some pretty amazing things that people really haven't thought of, just in very small pieces. And then when you feel like you've built a lot of small pieces, start putting the puzzle pieces together, build something bigger. Or maybe some of those puzzle pieces may be infallible information to another company that's looking to solve that little thing that they haven't been able to solve in their own company. So really just take the time to start small, build small, and go step by step. Just stop trying to become the next Amazon or the next whatever.
Get the fundamentals in place. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that is fantastic advice. I think back from my engineering days, I had a really good mentor, and he always talked about this sort of Lego brick analogy where
Mm-hmm.
everybody's got their own Lego set, and you really need to understand what's in your toolkit and master your own bricks before you start building and putting them together and building up a bigger items or bigger products.
Yeah, kind of goes back to the whole bridge builder piece too. Is just take what you know, build something that helps others navigate across that bridge. And I love that analogy.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the time today. It's been incredible talking to you. I can't believe there's someone out there that has such a varied journey into Web3, but I guess that's one of the beautiful things about this place. Yeah, it's been an absolute honor talking to you. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
No worries.